Who dat to you, and welcome into our Thursday night edition of the Who Dat Confessional podcast. It is July 6th. Hopefully y'all had a fantastic, enjoyable July 4th with you and your families. Happy Independence Day to the Americans listening. And if you are not in America, which we do have, I know we've got people in Brazil, South Korea, a few people in the Middle East. I know we definitely have a lot of fans over in the UK, Germany, wherever you are listening to the show. Who dat to you? Hope you have had an amazing week so far. Today, even though it's the off season, there's always something popping up. And right now and today, we're going to give some love to Mark Ingram, who is going down, officially retiring today. And he is joining, and I think this is a pretty big deal for him, the noon kickoff with Fox. So one, you're probably going to hear him talk about the Saints a lot because Fox tends to carry a lot of NFC games. And two, congratulations to the man who has really just been a great performer for forever. I mean, in I guess the best way I could really describe Mark Ingram, if you think about it, he's the Frank Gore of New Orleans Saints football. I mean, I realize that he was with Houston for a year, and he had him in Baltimore for 2, but really his entire career was as a New Orleans Saint. And he ends up putting up, 6,500 yards and over 50 touchdowns. We'll talk about that in a bit, but definitely going down as one of the Saints' best of all time. And today we're going to discuss how good he was, give him the props and credit that he's due, and maybe even get y'all's opinion as well. Who dat to those who are already here today listening to us live. Really appreciate those who are loyal and giving love to Who Dat Nation, even in the middle of the offseason, because I realize it's a lot easier to follow when the season is off and kicking. But the only way to stay fully ready for football is to never have to get ready. Stay ready. You don't have to get there. So keep on with the podcast. Appreciate y'all. Shout out to Lester, TJ, Bim, Beacon, AJ Gaines, Matthew Penn, James Griffin, the Antonio. I know Mr. Jerry is going to be sneaking in a bit. And if you are still around in the burning down symbolings of Twitter, welcome in from there too, because we did post over on our Twitter page that we were going live. And good Lord, see, there's Mr. Jerry. Twitter is just like, oh my gosh. Twitter, could you do anything more to kill yourself? Like, come on. So it feels like a piece of my childhood is dying. Technically it is, because I think I joined Twitter in like 2008, 2009, like when I graduated high school. So I guess kind of my childhood, not really my childhood, but you get what I mean. Like, it's wild how quickly that thing is just going. It's been bad. It's been absolutely bad. What's great though is what's happening for some of our Saints greats. Now, statistically, and this is where I know some people are going to get a little bit, I can already hear the wind being sucked through teeth right now. But Mark Ingram's going down as your best New Orleans Saints running back ever statistically. And that's not really a debatable topic. It's just a statistical fact. He is statistically the best running back New Orleans has ever had. Now, it is completely okay to say that, hey, Alvin Kamara is a better running back. I don't know how many people are going to argue that. There are people who are going to put Deuce McAllister above him. But no matter what, Mark Ingram has got to be at least in everybody's top 5. Depending on where you value certain traits, he's top 3. And even for some people, like Cameron Jordan, he lists him as the best overall running back in team history. Here's how he ends up finishing stat lines and how that actually compares across the New Orleans Saints. He has 6,500 rushing yards, which among running backs is first. He has 52 touchdowns as a rusher, which is first. He has 17 fumbles, which might sound like a lot until you hear that, well, Deuce McAllister actually had 3 more fumbles. He had 20 fumbles with right around the same amount of attempts. George Rogers, a famous New Orleans Saint, had 27. Dalton Hilliard had 30. So you did have a couple games that were surprising where we felt like he fumbled more than we were used to seeing. And obviously, Sean Payton definitely has some times where he went after Mark Ingram for some fumbling issues, but less than you would probably expect in that regard. And outside of just going into the numbers of rushing, let's talk about what he's done as a receiver. And he was a great blocker as well for the team. But even as a receiver, Mark Ingram in New Orleans registered 264 receptions, 1,800 yards, and another 5 touchdowns as a receiver. For comparison's sake, let's bring up another New Orleans Saints great. Pierre Thomas had 2,600 yards and 12 TDs. So not too far off in terms of yardage and about half the number of TDs. And this isn't something we knew Mark Ingram as much for. Like, obviously, Pierre Thomas was a screen guy. That's what we knew of him. He was famous during that prime New Orleans Saints era for that. So Ingram not only being a great rusher, and we brought up Pierre Thomas, who I love, but just a number for Pierre. Pierre only had 3,700 rushing yards. Ingram putting up almost 3,000 more rushing yards in his career, which is pretty impressive considering the limitations he had his first 3 years of his career. So it's really neat to see a guy like Ingram have the success that he did. I love that he ended up retiring a Saint. Hate how, his last season as a Saint ended, and, hate how his last carry as a New Orleans Saint ended. But certainly a guy that I hope gets a lot of the accolades that he deserves, and can't wait for him to get put into the Ring of Honor. I think it's undeniable that he deserves to be there. And even when you put him up against Saints greats, what he was able to put down is impressive. And random facts that you just never really think about is, did you know that the New Orleans Saints have actually only got 4 people in their history with 1,000 rushing attempts or more with the team? Really, it's only 4 of them. Mark Ingram, Deuce McAllister, Alvin Kamara, and Dalton Hilliard. Nobody else. George Rogers is close. He's got 995. He was just short, but only 4 rushers. And we're talking about a team that's been around almost 60 years. Only 4 rushers in the team's entire history that have had at least 1,000 attempts with the team. So you're kind of already, just by having the longevity he did, putting him in a special category, because that just simply doesn't really exist, at least in New Orleans. You can go to other teams, and I guess this is a sad fact, but we can pull up other teams that even are not even as old as New Orleans, but let's just say as old, and find a lot more success. It's a real sad truth that we have to kind of remember, that New Orleans does not have a storied history of successful teams. I mean, for a long time, they were trash. Now, I'm not saying they're, trash now. I love my Saints, and I'm not trying to hate on them. I'm just saying that, generally speaking, our New Orleans Saints have not been historically the best team in the league. That's just a fact. That's not any type of hate meant to get thrown at New Orleans. But really, think about how crazy it is that you only have 4 people who've maintained 1,100. To give you another franchise, I know you're going to be a little bit older here, but not terribly older. Look at the Vikings. The Vikings have got like 8 guys who have 1,100 attempts or more, and obviously AP has over 2,000 attempts with that team. Well, the Vikings came into existence in 1961. Well, the Saints were only a few years later. It's not like the Saints, are this team that's only been around for 20 years. So it's one, I don't want to feel like I'm diminishing him, saying that he's, a great because he's on a team that doesn't have a lot of historically great players, but it is impressive that he is statistically the best that you've ever had, right? And like James says, who'd had a congrats to him. And there are some amazing games when I think about Mark Ingram's career, and I'm curious to see what games y'all bring up. And some of the ones that come to mind immediately are going to be, the tandem game against Buffalo. He had 3 touchdowns that game, and that's 2017. It was Alvin Kamara's rookie year. That's that game where New Orleans ran like 27 straight times. It was insane. He had 3 rushing touchdowns on that day, and he was also, I think, caught a few passes out of the backfield. His best individual game ever, though, and I think for me personally, it was like his coming out game. Like, finally, you've given him a chance to be the guy that you drafted and be. It was going all the way back to 2014. Now, this is going back a decade, so y'all might not remember it. But he ran against Green Bay just up, down, left, front, and sideways. This was a game where he had like 25 attempts, almost 200 yards rushing, had a touchdown, had a reception, And this was like the first 3 years, 11, 12, and 13. They really only used him as a short yardage back. Like, Pierre Thomas was the between the 20s guy, and then when it came to actually just using him on the field, he really didn't get used the first 3 years except in very limited rotational settings. And it's skewed for a lot of people, the view of Mark Ingram. And I think that's fine. You can blame it on Sean Payton or whoever, but his first 3 years in the league, he had 1,400 rushing yards and 11 TDs. And let's not make any, lies or excuses. Like, a first-round running back draft pick, if you say that their first 3 years totaled 1,400 yards, that's disappointing. I like to think that it's disappointing because Sean Payton limited him, not because he was limited, though you do have to remember the famous turf toe and stuff he had at this point, and he wasn't fully % healthy. But, yeah, 2014 is where you finally saw him have that coming out, and if anything, I still feel like they held him back in 2014. And I guess this is me talking about Sean Payton because he had 964 yards that season. And he was averaging over 4 yards a clip. He should have had 1,000 yards rushing, but that was also the year that we had Kerry Robinson. Now, this was his first Pro Bowl year. So I think it's appropriate for me to give him his breakout. But they still were giving the ball to Kerry Robinson. Pierre Thomas was still around. You had Travis Cadet was, kind of coming into, I think it was Cadet's like rookie season. He was making receptions. Travis Cadet that year had like 40 receptions out of the backfield and was doing a little bit of rushing. So even when Ingram was at his peak and entering into his big peak, there was still a committee system that, limited some of the statistics that he could put out. So I guess even more surprising that he ends his career as the New Orleans statistical leader. It's kind of like TJ says, the splitting carries is a blessing and a curse because for Alvin Kamara, it's been a huge blessing. Alvin Kamara, I think, is able to have the longevity he does have because of the split. But Mark Ingram was always a traditional running back. Like he was a bell cow, and he never really got used for that. And then when they finally started using him, you saw him really pop off. And starting in 2014, Mark Ingram had 1,000 yards from scrimmage. He actually had 1,100. And for the next 4 years in a row, Mark Ingram had 1,100 or more yards from scrimmage. And in 2017, which is the year that you had Alvin Kamara, and I know not everybody likes me to say this, but I truly believe this. In 2017, Mark Ingram was the better running back. But obviously, Alvin Kamara is the better player. Like, Alvin Kamara has become the better running back. Alvin Kamara has become, to me, unarguably the best running back the team has ever had. For the first 4 years, I said, look, Alvin Kamara is the best, but we're going to let him get some longevity. Now that he's been here 6 years, about to hit his 7th year, the only thing that he hasn't done that I really wish AK would have is have a 1,000-yard rushing season, but he's had 6 years of at least 1,300 yards from scrimmage. He's got over 70 touchdowns. AK is the best running back ever for the New Orleans Saints. But in 2017, Ingram was the best running back on the team with a rookie right on his heels, and maybe that's what lit a fire in him to make him be better. And then sadly, 2018, he didn't play the entire season, got hurt, and then that was that next year where the agent, and I still kind of blame the agent, really screwed him over, tried to overplay his hand and, tried to get $8 million a year from the New Orleans Saints. And his agent's like, look, we're going to get it. We are going to get this. And Mickey Loomis pulled a normal Mickey Loomis, said, oh, you don't want our contract? Cool. Already got my backup plan ready. Signed Latavius Murray the next day. And then Mark Ingram ends up having to go play for Baltimore for a couple years. And I hate that for him, but at the same time, I liked it because it did prove that Mark Ingram was not just a product of a system. Mark Ingram went to a completely different style team, had 1,000-yard rushing, was a Pro Bowler with Baltimore. And people argue, well, Lamar Jackson was there and it takes attention away. I still think he had a great year as a running back. And again, in Baltimore, was playing in a committee system. He only had 200 carries, 205 carries the year that he had 1,000 yards with Baltimore. And then, of course, 2020, hurt again. So he's 31 years old. So it's kind of like I said, it's a blessing and a curse. But, man, what he put out on the field was so fun to watch. And it's also, I think, underrated a good bit. And it's like Jerry said, congrats to him. I'm really happy for him. And I do want to still see Alvin Kamara break a lot of his records. Now, one record Alvin Kamara is actually very close to breaking is the touchdown record. Alvin Kamara is at 49. Mark Ingram currently holds the record at 52. It seems likely that Alvin Kamara takes the rushing touchdown record from Mark Ingram this year. It seems pretty likely. I mean, he only needs 4 to do it. But it will take him at least 2 years, barring an insane season, for him to take the yardage number. Alvin Kamara has 5,100 rushing yards with the New Orleans Saints. Shocking, right? Well, that puts him about 1,400 yards behind Mark Ingram. And the way that Alvin Kamara has gone throughout his career, 700 to 800 yards is what you can typically expect from him. So it's going to take him 2 years, healthy years, to break the rushing yardage record. But one thing that he has already done, speaking of AK, is he has the yardage from scrimmage. AK has 8,888 yards from scrimmage, and then Mark Ingram is retiring from the New Orleans Saints with 8,304. Fun fact about Ingram, though, just to give him a little bit more love, he retires from the NFL with over 10,000 yards from scrimmage. Not a lot of players can say that. Welcome in, Joseph. Good to see you. We're giving love a little bit to Mark because Mark is officially retired, and I think he's retiring on a very high note in terms of what he did in his career and the success that he had to have. Now, TJ says it's about to be Kamara's last year on the team. I hope not, but I'm also a numbers nerd, and I've admitted that before. Like when I play Madden, I don't know how many of y'all still play Madden, but I still play Madden. I actually want to play it, and I want my stats to be accurate. I want my guys to become Hall of Famers. I want AK to have 1,000-yard season. I'm one of those guys. So, I mean, I do want AK to still be here, but we'll see. And it's like TJ says, Ingram went out on his own terms, not busted up on injuries. I do think that Ingram, had he really kind of pushed New Orleans, probably could have had another year here. I really do. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, but I really think that they would have kept him as a veteran running back on this team. He would not have gotten many carries this upcoming season. It would not have prevented them from getting Jamal Williams, would not have prevented them from drafting Kendra Miller. But I do think that you probably would have had Ingram as like that 3rd/4th running back on the roster this year. If he really wanted to be around, they probably would have let him come back around. But I'm glad that he went ahead and retired. And I am excited to see this next chapter. It's kind of crazy. Me and Mark Ingram are the exact same age. And it makes me feel some type of way. Really, the only people left in the league my age are punters, kickers, and a handful of quarterbacks. Because just don't. I mean, it's 2011 is when the man went into the league, and it makes me feel old. Some of y'all have had this experience already, but I'm just now running into it where like I hit that age, and guys my age are no longer in the NFL. I know some of y'all have experienced that already, but I'm just now hitting that, and it's just sitting here like, man, I remember when he got drafted. And never forget. Never forget, Dude said he'd lay a hand on Mark Ingram. I still believe that to this day. I could get one hand on him. He killed me afterwards. But one hand. I could do it. One hand. That was always a thing. I get one on there. One. And then I get completely wrecked. One. That's it. Just uno. Get one in. Little sneak attack. Pop, pop. And then I would die. But I still stick by my guns. Ingram no neck have itself with helicopter. Hey, it didn't say that we had to go toe to toe in a boxing match. I'm just saying I could get one in on him. So if I had to sneak him, I'd sneak him. I'm just saying I could get one in on Ingram. And having gotten to stand side to side with the man, let me tell you something. He ain't that big. It's actually kind of surprising how damn good Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram are in the NFL because they're the size of normal freaking people. Like I'm 5'10", technically 240 pounds, so I weigh a heck of a lot more than Mark Ingram. But he's not like 6'3", 220. He's not Derrick Henry. Like Mark Ingram is a regular ass shaped person who was damn good on the football field. It's kind of shocking. Like it really is. Like Mark Ingram in a lineup of just like regular people and fans, if you didn't know his face, would blend in. But yet, this is a guy that had multiple 1,000-yard scrimmage seasons. This guy was a 3-time Pro Bowler. Got over 50 touchdowns in the NFL. That means something. Multiple-time Player of the Week. What other stuff did he manage to pull off? I mean, he's got multiple awards. I remember he was in the NFL Top 100 like 3 different times. It was like, 2018, 19, and 20. He got voted in by his own peers in the top 100, and 2 of those were like in the top 50. So there were 2 points of 2 years into his career where the NFL said he was a top 50 player, which I think is really cool. Now, I don't put a ton of merit into the top 100, but, I still think that it has value. I mean, I think it is cool to see what, your peers think about you, but yeah, that's wild. Think about that, man. Like, we talk about what guys can do in the league. And anyway, back to his circling back, just some more fun Mark Ingram facts. Did you know 19 games with 100 yards or more rushing in a Sean Payton setting? That's insane. That's insane. And the reason I say, and I point out a Sean Payton setting is, let's use Alvin Kamara as an example. Who we do talk about Alvin Kamara being the best, right? Well, how many rushing games do you think Alvin Kamara has with 100 yards or more? 8. 6 years, he's got 8. Mark Ingram ended his career with 19 of them bad boys. Now, he did have, I think, 4 of them were with Baltimore. But in a Sean Payton system, he still managed to get 100-yard games. I mean, you don't do that in a Sean Payton system. You don't do that in a New Orleans offense. Put out another name, Pierre Thomas. Curious how many Pierre Thomas had, because we know Pierre Thomas was amazing. We love Pierre. Pierre Thomas had 4 games his entire career with 100 yards of rushing or more. 4 of them. That's crazy. Like, in terms of running backs across history, it's not. But in terms of the era of New Orleans, it's crazy that Mark Ingram was doing what he was doing. Like even Deuce McAllister, who in terms of like old school traditional, like just barrel you over running back. Because remember, Deuce was 6'1", like 230 when he was playing the league. Deuce was big boy. Like Deuce is still a big boy. I don't know if y'all have run into Deuce McAllister since. Man's still big. Large man who will hurt you. His career has 27, and most of those obviously came in the Jim Haslett era. So anyway, just fun facts. I wanted to give Mark Ingram a lot of love today because Mark Ingram, I feel like, deserves it. Man's retiring as one of the Saints' greats. The one thing that he didn't do, though, he never had a 100-yard receiving game. His closest was against Arizona, 2015, 98 yards. Man couldn't get 2 yards. Couldn't get 1 yard last year. There's my one singular burn for him this entire episode. There's that one burn for him. Couldn't get 1 yard last year. Couldn't get 2 yards 2015 to have his only 100-yard receiving season. But, hey, in terms of, like, as how things can be bad, how things can be good, I think worse things could definitely happen. NTR says, happy ended his career as a Saint. Sad it wasn't on a better note, for sure. I mean, I'll tell you, I have the same fear for Cameron Jordan. Like, if there's a New Orleans Saint who I believe, no offense, Alvin Kamara or anybody else, if there's a New Orleans Saint who deserves to be a Super Bowl champion, it's Cameron Jordan. You know, I worry Cameron Jordan doesn't get the recognition he deserves. I mean, to me, Cameron Jordan's a Hall of Famer. You know, he's already at 115 sacks. If he did nothing else the rest of his career, I think he should be in the Hall of Fame. But he's a guy that I think just deserved and deserves to have a Super Bowl ring. I hope that he gets it somehow, some way. I mean, it's really tough for me to envision Derek Carr leading us all the way there and Dennis Allen hoisting a Lombardi trophy. Like, even in Madden, you feel like that wouldn't happen. Like, Saints win the Super Bowl this year in Madden, and it's actually Sean Payton's graphic that comes out. So I want that for Cam. Really would have loved it for Ingram, and we'll kind of see how it plays out. Joe says hopefully Pete runs the ball more, but we have the team that can throw the ball. I mean, it's all about balance, right? Like, you know, I know earlier in my career when I started covering the team and before I went to the scouting camp and everything, I was really big on like the metrics of, well, when you run this many times, you win football games. And, you know, truthfully, when you run that many times, it's because you were winning the football game. Like, the running is correlated to the winning because you're winning, not because you're running. Not that running isn't important. I really want Pete to get the balance right, because that's the tricky part, right? Finding the balance, when to run on first down, second down, third down, when to run, when to have success. And man, God, I want Pete Carmichael to get it. I really hope he does. I really hope he does. But we'll see. We'll see. Cam Jordan's your top 5 all-time Saints? Same. For sure. Absolutely. 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 I 100% agree. And also, TJ does bring up a good point in our chat. Mark Ingram has got one of the best sound bites in New Orleans Saints history. Look at the details. I mean, that was a great moment. The locker room interviews of just him and Kamara, like those, 3 years. Y'all can't tell me that wasn't some of the most fun times to follow any sport. Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram together, like 2017, 2019, those 3 years, some of the most fun I've ever had as a Saints fan. Absolutely incredible. And I know 2018 did not go how it should have gone. And I'll personally always believe that was the year that should have been the Super Bowl. Even more so than 2011. 2018 should have been the Super Bowl. But the level of fun that we were having, just as fans, the team, absolutely insane. I hope that my kids get to experience that level of fun with this team one day, because that was absolutely just wonderful. I mean, it might sound stupid to some people, but have you ever just gone back and watched some of those old locker room videos like after games? I have. I love when they get posted on Twitter. It is absolutely insane. Yeah, I miss those times. I hope they come back. Haven't experienced that yet with Dennis Allen. We're going to see. We're going to see. Oh, man. Them two getting the call from Prime almost every Sunday night. They balled out, didn't they? I mean, in terms of as a duo, and we've forgotten that, but they were breaking records. I mean, as a duo, they were, in my opinion, the best running back duo in NFL history. I don't think anybody can really argue it. If you can, feel free. But the Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara duo, statistically, touchdowns, what they were doing on the field, yards per carry, all the different stats receiving. I can't name a better duo in history, especially going for, a solid 3 years. Yeah, it's at least 2 years, because 2019 he went to Baltimore and then he came back in 2021. So yeah, that was insane. I don't know, man. Now y'all got me getting all sad. I'm going to memory lane. Joe says, is it hard scouting for a team that you really cheer for? I would say yes, in that anytime that you like something, like you're invested in it emotionally, it can be more difficult to be objective. But at the same time, the type of, like, when you go through that process and you have somebody teach you, unless it's like the Saints teaching you, I don't know what it's like to learn in an environment where you're learning at the place you like. When I went through scouting and everything, I wasn't learning with the Saints. Now, I will give some love to Mark Ingram, because Mark Ingram is actually what got me into scouting, in terms of it was his scouting report was the first one that I wrote up as my entrance into the, well, I guess this is going way back. I don't know how many people remember this, but it's 2016, 2017, going back many years ago, when I actually got entered into a national scouting competition. It was a scouting report I wrote about Mark Ingram that got me in. Now, compared to what I would end up doing later, that report was trash. But when you have to go through and learn about player evaluation, they're having you do guys like Trevor Siemian when he's in Denver, and these no-name linebackers, and these DBs like Pierre Desir, and it's easy to be objective there. And then if you learn that way, you can be objective with the team you're covering. But yeah, just long-winded way of answering that question. The only running back duo to have 1,500 all-purpose yards in one season in the same season. TJ, will that ever happen again? I really don't think it will. I don't even know where it could happen again. Especially because right now we're going into a trend, I'm sure y'all noticing it, where the bigger backs are coming back, right? 2017, Mark Ingram had 1,500 yards from scrimmage. 2017, Alvin Kamara, 1,500 yards from scrimmage. Alvin Kamara had 13 TDs that year, and Ingram had 12. So not only did you have 3,000 combined yards between the two of them, you also had 25 touchdowns. I think that's another one that just, Ingram was great because Ingram scored. Like, Ingram finished his career with 75 touchdowns. I mean, there are not a lot of people in NFL history that have 75 touchdowns. I mean, just all time, all career running backs and everything. There are not a ton that are sitting there with 75 touchdowns. There just aren't. Hell, even in terms of like where guys rank, this is going to blow some of y'all's minds. Hear this. Did you know that Mark Ingram, in the history of running backs, is running back number 50 in yards gained in the history of the NFL? Ever. He has more rushing yards than Larry Zonka, D'Angelo Williams, Terrell Davis out of Denver, Jamal Charles, Michael Turner, Jonathan Stewart, Leroy Kelly, George Rogers. Shout out George Rogers again. You don't think about that. Mark Ingram is currently number 50 in rushing yards in NFL history. Wow. Now, obviously, he's not up in like the top 10, and he's not with the Walter Paytons and the Emmitt Smiths and Adrian Petersons. But personally, I never would have just sat here and thought that Mark Ingram was number 50 all-time NFL rushing yards. Never would have thought that. That's freaking cool. I think that's so awesome. I think that's freaking awesome. So again, this episode, and I knew coming in that we were going to do a little bit of this love, but the man's number 50 on the list. He's also tied number 45 in rushing touchdowns historically amongst everybody. The man had more rushing touchdowns than O.J. Simpson. Wild stat. You never would have thought. Wild stat. You never would have thought. more rushing touchdowns than O.J. Simpson, more than Terrell Davis, more than Tiki Barber, more than Roger Craig, the famous West Coast running back from the San Francisco 49ers back in the late 80s and 90s, more than Herschel Walker. Any of these amazing names ringing a bell? And that's wild to me. Like, credit to him. Love to him. That's freaking awesome. He's in the top 50 in those two categories. But when we think about Mark Ingram, we didn't normally would think that. Like, we wouldn't think that he's in these conversations. But he is in these conversations. And that's also why, like, I really hope that Saints fans give him the love that he deserves, because those first 3 years, and Ben admitted this when he was, talking at the beginning of the show, there's definitely a little bit of a kind of disappointment and bias those first early years. And I blame all that on Sean for the most part. And what he did in his prime, I mean, there's my favorite play, I think, of Ingram, just thinking of plays. There's one where he's pinballing around, ends up dragging like 3 Tampa Bay Buccaneers into the end zone for a touchdown run. Was absolutely phenomenal. He had one breakaway up the right side that always sticks with me because he actually showed like some sneaky speed there. But there's just some other ones if you want to give some people some, did you know that he was top 50 in both touchdowns and rushing yards? I'm going to do another one for yards from scrimmage. This is going to be another one that's fun because not many people have 10,000 yards from scrimmage. He does. In fact, now this list is going to be a little bit of a longer list. Keep in mind, because you are including wide receivers in this, you're including tight ends. But he is actually ranked 102 yards ever. Now, there are only 111 players in the history of the NFL who have so far gotten over 10,000 scrimmage yards, and he is one of them. You think about that. 100 years of football, professional football doing a long time. He is one of only 111 men who currently put out 10,000 scrimmage yards. Again, shout out to him. That's cool. That's cool. So fun Mark Ingram stats to take to your friends at the water cooler and pump him up a little bit. Give him a little bit of the big head. I think he's earned it. All right. We should probably move on from, I don't know, man. I feel like I should still find some other stats that he's surprisingly in the top at. I'm sure there's still something, right? I'm sure there's more that we can find that. I just pulled one. He is number 82 in NFL history, combined touchdowns. Top 100. Number 82 combined touchdowns. More than O.J. Simpson, more than Earl Campbell, more than Bob Hayes, more than Stan Van Buren. I'm calling out Hall of Famers right now. And that's wild. Raymond Berry, Larry Zonka, Art Monk, Cliff Branch, Terrell Davis again, Michael Irvin, Charlie Joyner, John Stallworth, Elroy Hirsch, Ollie Madsen, Paul Hornung, Shannon Sharp. All these Hall of Famers, he's got more touchdowns than. And I'm not trying to make an argument that he belongs in the Hall of Fame. It's just surprising. Surprising stats. Jim says, I think he needed those 3 years to develop. I don't think he did. I honestly don't think Mark Ingram needed the 3 years to develop. I just think he needed to get used, and he wouldn't do it. But Ingram's resiliency. Nowadays, a first round who had the lack of results Ingram had his first years would have requested a trade. Ingram stuck it out, and it paid off. I agree, and I still hate what happened to him with his agent, and he should have never left the New Orleans Saints. I feel like if he would have stayed here, yeah, I don't know if he. Well, I'll just say I know he wouldn't have single-handedly led us to the Super Bowl or anything, but he still should have been a New Orleans Saint his entire career. Still should have been it. But I agree that he didn't need a development. I mean, he's a Heisman Trophy-winning running back coming in the NFL. If you can't translate to the NFL with that, you can't translate. And I just think a lot of it was usage. And he wasn't terribly ineffective. When we think about it from that perspective, we're really kind of talking negatively about his first 3 years. But if you look at his first 3 years, he really didn't do too bad in terms of what he was averaging. He just wasn't getting used. He was averaging over 4 yards a carry in that time span. He put out 11 touchdowns and he was effective. He just wasn't getting used a lot. And I think that's kind of more of the big issue is they need to use him more. And they weren't using him more. Had they used him more, he probably would have done a little bit better. But that's all on history now. Imagine Ingram behind the Cowboys O-line like DeMarco Murray had. Maybe. Jim Henderson quote, they hand the ball off to Ingram and he gets his yard. Wow. Wow, Nikki. What a quote. What a quote, Nikki. Yeah, that's what his first 3 years were. So, I mean, it is what it is. And then, like I said, he got his opportunity. 2014, hit the Pro Bowl, and that's all it went. But he had to wait till he was 25 to get that op. 25. Waited 3 years in the league. That patience. That's big. So, any memories y'all want to throw up for Mark Ingram here as we give him his little love for this episode, which, again, shout out to the man. I can't wait to see him on Sundays. Because if y'all have never talked to Mark Ingram, he's an intelligent dude. He is definitely an intelligent dude. The only man to scream at Sean and live to tell about it. Man, you remember when Adrian Peterson screamed at Sean and he was gone like the next week? That is one thing I liked about Mark Ingram. Is Mark Ingram was willing to go toe-to-toe with Sean. Like, if something needed to get done, we need to run the ball. He felt like he was the guy. He wasn't a punk. Now, I don't think he was ever disrespectful, though. I really don't. I don't ever feel like he disrespected Sean Payton. But I do feel like he knew he had confidence in who he was as a player. And he had earned that. Like, he had earned the right to be confident in who he was as a player. He earned the right to call his shots. And I think that was a sign that Sean Payton respected him because of it. You know, the fact that he could do that, because not everybody could do that, man. Like, Adrian Peterson is definitely going to go down historically as a far better running back than Ingram ever was, right? I mean, I don't think that's really debatable. Now, we can definitely argue Adrian Peterson's the worst person, but Adrian Peterson's got like 15,000 rushing yards, and people have talked about him before as maybe being the best running back to ever do it, yada, yada. But literally half of a look to Sean Payton, and he was gone, man. What did he have? I think he had like 5 carries for, God, what did he even have with New Orleans? 27 carries for 81 yards. I went and looked it up. Like, come on. That's it. Like, that is literally what he ended up having. Now, funny enough, if you want some fun stats, that is not the worst. His worst team performance is actually when he was with Seattle. He only had 11 carries for 16 yards. But, random Adrian Peterson fact, the New Orleans Saints are the only team that he played for that he didn't score a touchdown with. He scored with Tennessee, scored with Seattle, Detroit, Arizona, Washington, and obviously Minnesota. Never scored a touchdown with New Orleans, but Seattle was actually the team that he was technically the worst on. So here's your little fun fact. And it was with Seattle like the very end of his career. I think it was like 1 game left, and he comes in for 1 game with Seattle, and that's about it. But yeah, fun random history. I do have the Adrian Peterson jersey, though. I do have that. I think you got to kind of have as a Saints fan. It's like a wild thing to have. I've got a bunch of running back jerseys. I've got more running back jerseys than anything else. I got running back jerseys, a couple wide receivers, and Willie Roaf. But y'all, look, I've had a great time tonight. We're going to wrap up the show. Congrats to Mark Ingram again. Join the Discord if you haven't already. Come hang out with me, chat with me on Twitter, wherever you are. I appreciate you, Who Dat Nation. We're going to be back Tuesday. More Saints news. We're getting closer and closer to camp. Things about to really start popping off. So you better get your questions ready, get your film ready. And to celebrate, y'all go watch you some Mark Ingram highlights. Normally, I tell you to go watch tape. Go watch you some highlights. He's had some great ones, and that man deserves to get a little bit of love. Who Dat, God bless, love every single one of you. You're all amazing. Deuces, I'm out.